Rights Movement by Amber Campbell. From the moment that the United States of America became just that, women were vying for their rights. For 60 years, women were the backbone of the home, with some running businesses, taking care of children, fighting in wars disguised as men, and holding their own. They also protected their property and family when the men were not around, yet women held no accountability. Women's suffrage is more than just a right to vote. It is a right of equality for women. In the 1700s, prior to the actual movement, a few states had granted, then rescinded, the rights for women to vote. Then, in 1776, Abigail Adams asked her husband, John Adams, while he is writing legislation, to remember women when making the laws. But he did not. In 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention gathered women to discuss their rights to vote. It was in Seneca Falls, New York. After a long debate, which involved 100 people, 32 of which were men, the Declaration of Sentiments was signed. In Worcester, Massachusetts, the first National Women's Rights Convention was held, and it consisted of over 1,000 people. This is where a committee was chosen to meet yearly to discuss the issues and strategies involved in the women's rights movement. Furthering the cause in 1869, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton formed the National Woman's Suffrage Association, for which the primary goal was to achieve voting rights congressionally through an amendment. Whereas Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell, along with others, started the American Women's Suffrage Association and was working to gain the right to vote via individual states. In 1890, there was a merge of the organizations of National Women and American Women's Suffrage Associations. In 1913, a woman named Alice Paul created an organization named the National Women's Party, also known as NWP, which started with the focus of women's right to vote. Eleanor Roosevelt wasn't in the NWP because she felt women should be protected, not looking for equality. Although they did not have the support of President Roosevelt's wife, the National Woman's Party continued submitting 600 pieces of legislation, for which the 300 were accepted. In May 1913, Woodrow Wilson became president, and prior to his inauguration, Paul and her associates rallied at the White House. These assemblages continued with forbearance until 1917, when the United States decided to enter the World War I. Paul and many of her followers were arrested, and while in jail, went on a hunger strike. Wilson did not want the plight of this hurting the reputation of the United States, since now they had declared war and inputting the reputation he wanted to build for himself. Because of this, Wilson requested that the United States Congress adopt the 19th Amendment. Over the course of 72 years, from 1848 to 1920, women gathered and gained support to begin with just the right to vote, and in 1920 the 19th Amendment was taken into the Constitution, giving women the equality they've been asking for. The amendment adopted was written by Susan B. Anthony and first introduced in 1878. Several additional organizations began popping up to give more than just the right to vote, but to allow women to have equality of wages and jobs. Alice Paul and the suffragettes did not stop with just having a voting privilege. They continued the fight, and now it was for equal rights. In 1923, if a woman was to obtain work in order to take care of herself and her family, she needed to be allowed to do so. The National Women's Party made sure to get their messages out with the publication of equal rights. It was not until 1972 that the Equal Rights Amendment was accepted.